What is up, everyone? JD here. I hope you're all doing well today. Today we're going to be doing the disassembly and maintenance for the Kershaw Iridium. Really like this model from Kershaw, brand new for 2023, and I think they really hit a home run with this particular model. Awesome little crossbar locking knife, has D2 steel, really thin and slicey. They did a belt satin finish on here, which is great because as long as you clean this after you use it to keep any moisture off of it, it will help prevent it from getting any type of corrosion. I love the aluminum scales on here. This is just a great size, great EDC. But let's go ahead and jump into it. I always recommend a set of WeHa bits. I have some linked down in the description below along with the stubby driver. I believe this is going to require a T6 to remove the pocket screw, the pocket clip, the pocket screw, Lord have mercy, and the standoff hardware. The other reason that I really like this mat is because it has these little magnetic pockets that help keep anything from sliding around. So they put a little bit of oil here to prevent it from wearing in, but you can see it already has a little bit of a mark there. Should be T6s for the standoff here, and they are tight, which is another reason I recommend to everyone to use the WeHa bits, because with the T6s and the blue Loctite on there, it is going to challenge opening or removing these screws, opening up the knife, removing these screws, and the WeHa's bits are hardened, so you're not going to worry about stripping or damaging the bit or the screw. So really easy to remove that. Next, you'll need to grab your T8. I don't have all my regular hardware out here. I just grabbed these because it was close. But T8, making sure that I grabbed the T8. Oh, that's weird. Why is there a T7 in here? Let me see something. This might have been the bits that came with the driver. There we go, T8. Might have been the bits that came with the driver. I think I did stick those in there just to have it organized. From here, you'll be able to remove the pivot. It feels like it's captive. Yes, it's spun a little bit because there's a little bit of play, but not too much. And the pivot came out relatively easy. A little bit of white Loctite, nothing too bad there. And we'll go ahead and have a look at what the Omega spring looks like. So you can see they have some lithium grease here where it's riding across the aluminum scales, and then they did put some factory grease in there, which is a good thing. I think that's always a good idea for the aluminum screws. But if you wanted to, at this point, you could remove the Omega spring, and then you could disassemble it from the other side to take it all the way down. What I'm going to do is actually reinstall this because I like everything that I'm seeing here from the factory. Good grease, nice and clean, and the lithium grease should keep it from falling apart. What I'm going to be doing is actually grabbing my T6s and putting the hardware back on here, and I'm going to show you the way that the Access Lock has an advantage as far as its maintenance and care. We will actually clean out the pivot grease, the grease from the ball bearing, and reinstall it that way. I just wanted to show the Omega spring. It looked like it was a steel spring, which is fine. And there are aftermarket springs out there that should fit this, that go on the bug out. Those usually fit these types of knives because it looks like the exact same style Omega spring. All right, so let's go ahead and reinstall. I'm going to save the pocket clip being the last thing to reinstall. Make sure these are nice and snug. Yep. So we'll install the pocket clip last. And let me grab the T8 again. Make sure. Yep, T8. And put that in here. What you want to do with the blade facing the mat, pull back on your Omega springs and then just touch the outside of the pivot, and you should be able to push that right on through to the other side, removing the pivot completely, setting it aside, and then from here you should be able to slide the knife out. I'm checking to see if I can tell. Okay, they are very small, very small bearings on the, let's see if I can get it. There we go. Very small washers and bearings. I mean, absolutely tiny, tiny washers and bearings. I've never seen any quite this small, but they are very tiny. All right, so from here, this is the easiest way to maintain your axis or crossbar style locking knife. You should be able to relatively easy get in here easily to clean it up in the pivot. I say that and I struggle. An easy way to do that is just to kind of bind up the cloth in there, and then you should be able to just work it back and forth on either side. Relatively easy, cleaning out your pivot sections and everything like that. I'm going to very carefully clean these. These are super tiny, super tiny nylon, and they appear to be silver, so I'm assuming they're going to be these steel bearings. But my goodness, are they tiny. I was not expecting them to be this small. I was expecting to see kind of your typical sized washers and bearings. Could present a little bit of a challenge to reinstall. We'll find out here in just a minute. Go ahead and clean all of the old grease off. They have already built a little bit of a track on the D2, and D2 is not particularly tough, so there's no real surprise there. I'm just having a look to see how the pivot is set up. Okay, D shape is right here on this side. I don't know if I'll be able to get the shine to show that. So what we'll do is try to figure out, does it go to the back? With it being black, even with the good lighting in here, it's a little hard to tell. Let me see. Okay, yeah, so it looks like this side is completely rounded out. And okay, it looks like the D shape faces, yep, the back of the knife. So we'll make sure that we install it from the show side up. Now what you want to do is just grab your favorite grease. Grab the bearing the best that you can. These are so tiny. And go ahead and lube those up. I mean, they feel smooth, but man, they are microscopic. Microscopic. Which, with them being white on the silver blade, it is going to make it a little bit more challenging than it is with the gold colored phosphor bronze washers that you usually install here. But let's go ahead and give it a little shot and see. Yeah, I can tell you guys are going to make this a pain in the butt. We might end up having to just completely break the knife down and install it that way. So let's see if we can even get this threaded with the washers. Yeah, so the washers are not centered. I can see that they've moved back. All right, so we're going to go ahead and disassemble and install. Where did I say the D-ship pivot is? On this side. So we're going to disinstall it. We're going to uninstall it from this side. And that is much easier to do with the larger washers, being that these are so tiny. It is a trick that is going to be very difficult to pull off on this knife. So we'll just go ahead, remove the scales. Man, everything is tiny, tiny, tiny on this knife. Tiny, 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 tiny. I don't know that I'm going to be able to reinstall it any way that's easy because of how they designed this. The stop pin, you're going to have to try to like work over top of in order to get that in there. And I think the only way that we'll be able to do that is by pushing it all the way through or halfway through on this piece and then just kind of sliding it in like that. So I'm going to try my best to do this and we will see how it goes. So we'll install the D-shaped pivot back in. Thank goodness this is D-shaped. Okay, that is laying completely flush in there. We will install one of these washers. I mean, it is super tight tolerances, guys. Super tight tolerances. So make sure that you have lubed that extremely well. Reinstall the blade. Okay. Reinstall your other pivot, and you're gonna have to just be patient with this. This is gonna be a big old challenge. This is not the nicest design I've seen on a crossbar locking knife. It is actually way harder than it needs to be. So if you're going to disassemble to maintain this, be prepared to spend a little bit of time on it because it is going to challenge you. So with the stop pin started, what you'll want to do is work your way across the bar. Crap. Let's try. Let me see if I can get it to work this way. It's going to be a lot to explain how I made that work, but basically I ended up having to hold this stop pin down so that the bearing wasn't sliding around, so keeping just a little bit of lip there and pulling that bar back from the other side to get it to kind of seat. So I have never seen one quite this challenging, and if you're, if you have any tips, leave them in the comments below for anybody that's looking for the disassembly and maintenance of this knife. But it is truly going to be a challenge to do the disassembly without finding a way to be able to pull that stop pin out completely. So I am going to be putting this back together and reinstall your body screws, your standoff screws. They should be able to go in since the other side's nice and tight now. No, it's spinning on the other side. That's one of the things I've worried about with this one. So we'll take the stubby driver and there we go. Hold the knife down against the mat for some leverage, and this should tighten everything on this side up. Yep, everything's nice and snug. Lord have mercy, the steel bit is not sticking to the magnet here. But I would have liked to see at this price point captive bearings or D-shaped bearings here, and it is doing the same thing on this one. So with the knife facing down, I'm doing my best to demonstrate how I'm getting away with this, but every step of this has been truly way more challenging than it needs to be. I think if they had captive barrels here, this becomes way easier to disassemble, to do this type of maintenance. And then I just feel like those bearings are way too small for the knife. I feel like they should have at least gone with a 5mm pivot and installed much bigger bearings on here, because this is way more challenging than it needed to be to disassemble this. So I'm a little disappointed in that regard. Lots of white Loctite on there, which is good, because that will prevent it from backing out in the pivot, which is good, because this is, again, this is one of the more challenging crossbar locking knives I've worked on in a while. I don't remember having one quite this challenging before. Why is it not? There we go. There we go. It wasn't seating. Not going to over tighten it. I'm going to wait till I get the other screw and the pocket clip reinstalled. All right, so we are done with this. Very challenging. The problem is the washers are very small, so you can't just take the pivot out like you do most crossbar locks to take it apart and disassemble it. I think I got the pivot too tight. Let me back that out a little bit. The other challenge with this as well is they don't have captive barrels. The captive barrels would really help this, because you are going to need to totally break this all the way down. There we go. We're centered. Good action. A little bit of side to side. And I think that just doing those better washers on here and captive barrels, so that when you're taking this apart, it's a little bit easier. The initial disassembly is super challenging, and the washers, the bearings, they're very tiny. I worry about the durability on this knife after having seen how small those washers are, those roller bearings are. They're very petite nylon. Very small, which means the tolerance has got to be exactly right. I worry about the bearings falling out on a hard use on this knife, so I am kind of glad that I disassembled it. I was really enjoying the knife up until this point, but it is very disappointing to see what type of washers are in here. They're very small. The pivot is a unique size, so I didn't see anything on the little skiff tool that you use to measure this. It was too loose for... Hold on, I'll tell you in 1 second. It was too loose for 3/16 and too tight for 4mm. So it didn't really seem like it would fit, and I would be reluctant to put the 5mm, 1mm bearings that I have in there. They might have other sizes that are smaller than that on the Skiff website, or unique like that, but it is a very unique size, and a little concerning for me on the maintenance piece, and those bearings being so small. I worry about the durability of this if it were to be used heavily or hard use. Anyway, I hope this video helped you. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks to everyone out there that is regularly leaving the comments, the likes, and supporting the channel. I appreciate each and every one of you. I hope you have a fantastic week. Until next time, peace.